Today is October 9th. It's the DEI Advisory Committee. We'll start with attendance, go around the room and say who's here. Rob, we'll start with you.
Sure. Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent. Welcome.
Sue Curley, School Psychologist, Quinnesset.
Nice. Victoria Cormier, student at North Kingstown High School.
William Moss, Jr. at NKHS.
Kalia Schmerer, North Kingstown community member.
Jennifer Lima, school committee member.
Jacqueline Lawler, teacher at DMS. Shivali Finkelstein, principal at the high school.
Okay, awesome. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, awesome. So we've got a couple things on the agenda, but I know Rob has a time constraint, so I figured that we would turn back over the vision statement, which we had approved, and then got sent to the school committee,
Yep.
and the school committee approved, but if you can just kind of talk about next steps from there.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. So good news. Our vision statement that we worked so hard on and spent so much time on was approved. So great job, everybody. I know it was a lot of good conversation and it took a lot of time, but ultimately, I think we did a great job and turned out a great statement. And the statement is important, obviously, to making our values very clear and explicit about equity and how we champion equity in our district. So as Jen just mentioned, the next step is the harder work, which is making the statement something that really comes alive in our school department and across our school community. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, I think, as one of our goals moving forward, is how we put our action equity vision statement, that's okay, into action, and how we make it, how we tie it to our practice, right? And how we make that connection explicit within our schools, okay? And that's really what is exciting work, because that's where we bring the vision we have to practice, where we can start looking at practices that promote the kind of learning for all that we talk about. And so that's kind of where we are, and I'm excited to get started on that.
Awesome.
Did they just approve it straight up, or did they have feedback, or were they like, this is great?
It was a quick approval,
Okay,
I
great.
think. Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was good. It went pretty quickly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, Victoria, without you, last time we almost couldn't even get through it. Without you reading
Without
it,
you
we were like,
reading
I
it,
don't know,
yep.
it sounds like garbage, I don't know, we can't do it. We missed you.
I also
your reading voice.
quickly, just to take a quick side turn here, I want to introduce two new members that are here with us tonight for the first time. It's Heather?
May. I'm May.
May. I
Yeah.
apologize.
No,
I'm
no
sorry.
worries. She's in
Okay.
disguise, she's
Yeah, and she's not new. She has been here. She just hasn't been at the past few
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah.
Got
Yes.
it. I apologize.
No worries.
my very sorry for that. But we have with us here Dr. Sue Curley from our Quinnesset Elementary School psychologist. She is a incredibly highly valued member of our team at Quinnesset and throughout our district. And I was thrilled to hear that she was interested in joining our DEI subcommittee group. So, Dr. Curley, thank you so much for joining us, and we are thrilled to have you as part of our team.
And I just would say my sons both went to North Kingston High School, so I have a stake in it from the stakeholders end too.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, Shivali, can you connect to that vision board since Rob is leaving? Yeah.
Okay, you want to do that?
Yeah.
All right.
Just, I think it'll be easier to go through the goals if we're all, since not everybody has a computer. Erin couldn't make it tonight, but she had taken, based on the conversation that we had at the last meeting about like taking like the big goals that we talked about and kind of breaking them down. And she's really good at that, and she put through she took the big goals and kind of broke them down into like maybe sub pieces of it. So I figured we could just all review them tonight, see what like resonates, what doesn't, what we want to move forward, and and go from there. The meeting dates that we discussed last year, there was like a slight change to them, so I reattached to the agenda, what they are now. We just had to change it because, there was a conflict with one other advisory, committee meeting, but it's basically the same, we just changed one. I updated the calendar invite and the thing is here. Did anybody have any thoughts on goals or where we wanna go after the last meeting? No? Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I do.
Okay. Sorry, that's good.
I feel very strongly that like professional development for educators should be central in terms of like disseminating information and making sure that we are acting in an equitable manner in general, because I feel very strongly that, you know, teachers in the classroom are sort of like on the front lines of this conversation, and there has to be a lot of like relearning, unlearning and relearning of things. And so I would really like I would like some of our conversation to focus on professional development and learning opportunities for educators.
Okay, awesome. No, that's great, and I think that was one of the main,
Yeah,
the main
it was.
one, so we can really kind of dive into like what that looks like in a practical, like, manner of getting that implemented. Did anybody else have anything that really, like, stuck with them?
So I do have a question, just to piggyback on that. Has there been professional development that somewhat aligns with the DEI, or is
There
it
has.
starting fresh?
Yeah.
No, I think there has, yes.
So could you like give us an idea, because you always see there's professional development days and right to read and whatever else.
Yeah, so I'm looking up right now from my notes.
So there was the one day, right, at, in
Convocation.
April, right?
Oh, no, it was April, yeah, you're right,
In
it wasn't
April.
convocation, yeah.
And it was like a half a day.
It was like 3 hours, yeah.
And we had a, Rob, do you wanna?
Sure, yeah, we had a speaker, Dr. Karen Murray Johnson from
Thank you.
University of Rhode Island, and she came in with she's a local parent and member of our community, and she's a professor at URI, and she came in and basically gave a talk to the entire faculty, K to 12 and staff, and about issues relating to equity, you know, DEI initiatives that we've talked about. She touched on a number of things. I mean, she talked about it was really it was a challenging message, I would say, but it was an important message, you know.
And it's centered largely on race, you know, talking in DEI, like it encompasses a lot of different things. This was about race centrally.
Mm-hmm.
Chevalier, I just
Yep.
beeped you on the file, on the Excel file in your email, I emailed it to you.
Oh, got it, okay.
I will say that, like, that was like the beginning of a conversation, and
Yes.
I think a lot of feedback that we got, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, was that the, teachers, want more, right?
Yeah.
Like that, like, they didn't want that just to be it, and that's it for like another year, like, that was like a good starting point.
Yep.
And that was April, it's October, and like, I know we've talked about having, you know, like the people come in and coaching our team and everything, but like, that really was the only true focus, like a deliberate, we're gonna have a discussion around like equity issues for PD. Like, I don't know what's embedded in other stuff, but that was the only one that was truly intentional.
Yeah, so there are other things that are going on that are definitely in the spirit of equity that's happening on a smaller scale. We have a group right now that's a part of a core of teachers who are getting training through the Partnership for Educational Leadership on something called equitable adaptive instruction and continuous improvement. So is it explicitly dealing with like specific issues of race and equitability? Not necessarily, but it's talking about practice. It's talking about the practices you can bring to a classroom that are going to elevate all learners and that are going to kind of bring all the strengths of all students up to the fore. It's more of an approach that is empowering to all students, regardless of like their backgrounds or strengths or challenges. It has to do with really tapping into the value of all and the abilities of all. And there's explicit practices for this. You know, sometimes we lose sight of it as educators because, you know, the system we work within sometimes restricts us a lot in terms of, like, you could point to a lot of different things that are naturally sort of restrictive, but they're just what we do, you know, based on school. But practices we bring to the classroom, and there's training for this, the mindsets we bring to the classroom, the expectations we have for students, understanding that, you know, the words we choose to use, understanding that, like, the environment we create in our classroom, right, has a real profound impact on students' abilities to achieve at high levels. And sometimes, unbeknownst to us, we use words and we send messages that we don't have high expectations for kids, you know, or we don't believe kids can be successful. And so it's bringing awareness to that, and that's kind of what this particular training is about. Is really kind of pinpointing things we might be doing unbeknownst to us that create an inequitable environment in our classrooms. So it's like one of those things where you can't fix a problem until you identify it, you know. And sometimes there's a inertia that goes into some practices where it has to be identified. Hey, you know what? This might not be having the effect you think it is.
And I think all of those things are great, and I'm glad to see it happening. Like, one of the things that the recommendation was, like, we've been talking in a broad sense about professional development, like the specific recommendation was recommended topics for training are on cultural awareness, culturally responsive teaching, which you just talked about, culturally responsive language and leadership, but also implicit bias, gender bias, LGBTQIA plus student support, neurodiversity, foundational equity courses, like the difference between equity and equality, anti-racism, microaggressions, anti-bias, how to talk with students about identities, including race, gender, and ethnicity, and then how to support students, you know, from all different demographics, and providing instructional spaces for supporting students. So, like, those are the types of things, like, in my mind, and I'm not a teacher, but when I hear, like, equity-focused professional development, it's those things also, like, not just the teaching practices, and I'm not a teacher, but, like, what are your thoughts on that, Jackie?
No, I agree fully, and I think that the teaching practices are super useful, and I think they're just practical, and in my daily life I will use that training, and I hope to receive that training, and I think it's great. And I think that having, like, explicit talks about culture and race, outside of just pedagogy, will help to inform all of those practices. So yes.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, but yeah, that's.
As a teacher here, I think.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want the actual issues that cause this to become a goal to get lost in teaching practices, if that makes sense, like.
Yeah, it kinda. So are we kind of, like, separating? See, I think the teaching practice is really central to it. I really do. Not that it's the only thing, but I do think that I do think that's central to like the equity question, because ultimately the most important part of what happens during a school day is what happens in the classroom. That a student, again, not the only important thing, but the most important thing when it comes to impacting student learning, right, is the kind of practices that we engage in during that. So I don't necessarily separate the two of them. I think the conversations are important, but it comes down to, like, I think looking at things as mindset and practice. They both are important, but doing one and not the other.
No, you have to do both, and I
Yeah.
think that's like, because I think it's great if you're teaching, like, our teachers how to be more culturally responsive in the pedagogy, right? But if you haven't had the conversation with teachers about what a microaggression is and how it's harming students in our district, like, that is a big.
But the one thing that I will, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the one thing I think I will, like, just agree with Rob with is that sometimes looking at pedagogy can be a really useful way in to that conversation, because I may not be ready to have a conversation about microaggressions in my classroom, but I may be ready to have a conversation about, hey, I noticed that, 40% of your students today did not raise their hand. And, like, why is that? And I might go, oh, 40% of my students did not raise their hand. Okay, and then we can look at, like, deeper into what that is and then why that is, and it might lead us to a conversation about what do those 40% of students have in common, or, like, what did I do? So, like, sometimes I think it would be a useful way in. to that same conversation and not attack like teacher person, but teacher practice.
Right.
And I think for a lot of teachers, that's like just a useful framing.
Mhm.
And I applaud you and Shivali for like having like a DEI perspective when you're talking about this, and not just like what test scores or something
Mm.
when you're talking about these pedagogical practices.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and and I think as we often find ourselves, I think, in these conversations, I think we agree.
We do,
Yeah,
we
like,
agree.
absolutely,
You
yeah,
know what
I have
mean?
no doubt about it,
And there's
yeah.
and this topic tends to be very thick and very layered, and that's a good thing. Those are good things to I think discuss, and I think at the end we want the same thing. We want our schools to be widely inclusive and full of that kind of like empowerment, where students feel like they have a voice where they come to school, and where they feel like they have that sense of confidence, right, from the environment that they're walking into. So 100%, I'm 100% with you on that. I think we all are. And so it's hard work. I mean, it's hard work, but I do think that like we're going to continue to look at it from a lot of different angles. I think the conversation with Dr. Murray Johnson last year was effective. I think it was a good conversation. I think it was an important conversation. But I also think that having the conversation in the manner it was had in front of everybody is very challenging.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
very challenging.
Yes.
And it's somewhat impersonal. And I think she did a
Yes.
phenomenal job.
Yeah, she
She
did a
did.
very good
I
job.
think she did a phenomenal job. But I also think that's a very difficult task to put on anybody.
Yeah.
To
And
talk
what
about this.
happened was, if I can say, like, what happened was we had this big professional development, and then we all went into our tiny groups and went, and we talked like in our tiny groups.
Mhm.
And it would be really cool if there were like then a structured follow-up to that big conversation in a tiny group
Mm.
that said like, okay, so like we just had this really big thing, now how do you take it with you and just have a structured follow-up, I think would be a really useful
Mhm.
way
Yep, that's
to
fair.
follow
That's a
up
fair
with that.
point.
And
Yep.
if I can add to the training Rob was talking about, I went to that training, and in that training came up a lot of conversation about the whole tracking and,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep,
like
huge.
if you are planning and teaching to all students, part of the pedagogy also requires you to think about like those like they presented to us how tracking students and having higher expectations for one group versus the other group, and how that affects and brings unintentional disparities, and we really focused on that and how to do that. And then that kind of brought like a question of, is there a need for systematic change where we are not tracking students? And if you look at the demographics of students that are tracked, in what demographics are you finding? So it really started off with pedagogy, like Rob said, but it really got deeper into like the more deep-rooted issues. So I agree, while there is a need for a conversation specific to that, but you can kind of, it goes there.
It does.
It goes
And to piggyback on that really quickly, one of the other things we're looking at this year is I mentioned this before, we're looking at studying access to advanced courses, right? And really targeting, doing a better job of increasing the enrollment of students who are racially diverse in advanced courses, of students who profile as traditionally more underserved in advanced courses. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, and we've talked about this, we've started the conversation around how can we be explicit to students, because a lot of times students, they don't hear enough from adults of shots of confidence. You can do this, like pulling them aside and explicitly telling them like this is a path that is for you, that this is a path that you have the ability to succeed in. Sometimes we take it for granted, or we just maybe get too busy, but we're trying to bring more attention to that, to really look for those students who might not be challenging themselves enough but could do it, and really making sure we're explicitly identifying them and reaching out to them and showing them as a school, you can do this. This is the path we can bring for you. So it's just another thing we're talking about right now, is how to make sure that we're.
So I think that's actually, Charlotte, can you flip to the 24-25 goals tab? I think, so the way that this is lined out is that, and anybody who, I think I had sent, does everybody who has a computer who wants to look at it have access to the link? I had sent it out, but I can do it again, hang on one second. so the way that Erin broke this out was she took the like original goals, which were the 5 recommendations that the committee worked on last year, and kind of said, okay, so these were the big 5, and that's like all the way down in column A. And then sorry, I'm like trying to talk and find everybody's emails
Take
all
your
at the
time.
same time. And then the next tab she did was like, what did we actually do with that goal, in 24, 25? And then how could we break that down, in 24, for this year? So if we go down the big goals in column A, they were around the equity vision statement. They were,
This was the first one.
Create an equity vision statement, engage stakeholders in creating it, and then publicize it throughout the district. Create an equity communication plan to develop key messages to share the vision for equity both internally and externally. Okay, so that's about the communication piece.
yep, okay,
Yep.
so I just sent the file out to everybody.
Okay.
So, Shivali, do you wanna, let's go down before we like dive
Yeah.
into them. So there was that
Okay.
one, there was the equity vision statement, there was, monitoring the discipline data and, reviewing that. There was increasing opportunities for students to provide input in areas that they value. The professional development, and in addition to that, learning sessions for students, like that was like a twofer. And then, greater penalties for hateful speech and behavior. And then academic support offerings outside of classroom instruction time. And I think, was that the last one? Oh, no, access to advanced courses, like you just talked about. So those were like the big things that the committee had, developed last year. And then, I think what we had talked about last time was that, so maybe we did like a broad brush on all of them, but there's more in each one that we could dive into. And so that's what Erin kind of like outlined in 6, was like ways that we could take those big goals and improve them even more. And like, I don't know, if anybody has a particular, like we just talked about the professional development one, and, the equity vision statement is another one, but my thought was that we could go through, figure out which ones, like, people feel like an urgency around, and then break it down and like, cause we're gonna have to do work outside of these meetings and like assign tasks to people who are interested in taking that on.
So, are we still on professional development? Cause I did have a question.
Oh, no, keep
on
going,
that.
yeah.
So that's why I was just curious, like what was done, like, and I think about the issues like implicit bias and microaggression. Like, do teachers, when they're learning about this, say, oh yeah, I did that, like, or like, in terms of like self-awareness, where does that come in? And I asked that from, as a parent whose child came home to me, she graduated from high school last year, I think it was her senior year, and mentioned that a particular adult had said to her after Thanksgiving, did you have any good soul food for Thanksgiving? Now, my daughter's not African American, she's Ethiopian American, but this person made an assumption, and my daughter was just like, I don't know, she probably responded very passively, but it was like, you've got to be kidding. And the other thing was, she used to hang out with another girl who was biracial, and this person could never get their name straight. She'd always confuse them, and so there were times like that I don't think she would have gone to the administration to say, like, this was really hurtful, but that stuff is gonna get internalized, so how do you, like, and as a parent, you certainly don't wanna be the one, because the child is more than likely going to say, please, like, I don't wanna be embarrassed.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, either empower students to, feel heard, like, or is there a way to confidentially do that? But that has stuck with me, and I don't know what the
It should
solution
stick with
is.
you, 'cause that's
We
not
didn't have any
okay.
soul food for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We had regular things, but for somebody to just make that assumption,
Yeah, it's a problem.
Right, and that's my concern, Rob, is
Yeah.
like, just focusing on teaching methods doesn't address that, and that's the stuff that is, it happened to your
it
daughter.
was
and
not in an academic class, it was in an
Correct.
extracurricular activity.
Yeah, and, but it also happens in the classrooms too, like I've heard students tell me things, and we have students here who can probably say things that they've heard, like that teachers have said or done, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that have harmful impact, and that's my concern when it comes to professional development, is like maybe we can't do it in like the big scale like we did in April, but I feel like we're not making the specific equity-focused professional development even available.
Yeah.
Like there are ways, like we reach out to NERI, like can we, you know, Providence doesn't Black Lives for Teaching, like, you know, we can't mandate those things, but we can certainly put them in front of people and say, hey, this is an option if you'd like to learn more, and I feel like we're not doing that. Even like with the safe zone training, when we had the safe zone training come in, that wasn't well publicized, like it wasn't encouraged for teachers to attend, and I think stuff like that makes a difference. What do you, William, Victoria, any comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely important to like talk about those things, and like students are, especially in NK, like, you know, like there are things that sometimes teachers don't realize that they might do.
Yeah, like I had a teacher that used like a racial slur as a word for like something in a book. She was referring to like chainmail armor, but she said something very different, and it was like kind of offsetting, and I don't think she intended it that way at all, but it was very like disturbing in a way. And yeah, so yeah, I think it's really important to kind of like teach teachers that like maybe they don't mean to like offend anybody, but they need to know like certain things can't be said in a classroom setting.
Yeah, and
So-
even like just like learning new things, like today I named this file the master equity audit. Like master is a slave term, right? And so like, but that's a word that's so ingrained in our vocabulary, like it's just automatic, right? And so I had to change it to Maine, like because somebody called it out to me, which I appreciated because it's just ingrained, right? So like not intending to be harmful, not like, but even people who are trying to do well make mistakes, right? And so it's just, you can't have the conversation unless you have the conversation and say, like, I get it, like, it's hard to change old habits, you know what I mean? Like, and I hear it from my family too, like, I get called out by them, and I'm constantly learning. And I think having that conversation about, like, you're not that's why they call it a microaggression, like, you're not intending to hurt somebody, but all those little things that those students hear every day become,
They build up,
they
yeah.
build up.
For sure.
I think teaching the students too to be able to like address things like that, which is super obviously not easy for adults to do either, but like if you're the like demographic affected by that phrase, you're already uncomfortable, so like having like teaching them about like your friend's uncomfortable, you're waiting for them to say something, but you kind of, for lack of a better term, have the privilege in this situation.
No, absolutely.
And can like call it out, cause I think when, I feel super old saying this, but like when like I was in school, like you don't, at least my school system, you don't question teachers, you don't question your parents, you don't question anybody, and I think like more so now it's like adults say sorry, adults acknowledge,
Right.
hopefully, like what mistakes they made, and like making it that kind of culture instead, where a teacher's not gonna get like offended or off-put that like something was called out.
Right.
And I feel like also if you take the time to like educate students about that, it can go beyond just like the classroom. And like for example, like in my sports team, there's a student who the coach like gave her a nickname because she didn't feel like learning how to pronounce her name, and she like doesn't like the nickname at all, but she like doesn't feel like she can like stand up for herself and like tell the coach, and like there's just like all these different places where kids just don't feel like they can stand up for themselves, but like by prioritizing, you know, like educating kids that, you know, they also have a voice, like it can really help them.
Yeah, like I feel like we talk about it mostly with like bullying, like if you see Josh kick Derek in the head 600 times, maybe stand up for Derek at some point, but it's not like, like in those situations, like verbal, where it's like, cause I feel like especially as like young girls and women, you're like, oh, well, they didn't mean it that way, or like whatever. So just being able to getting kids comfortable for like saying things that make them uncomfortable or seemingly make their friend uncomfortable or anybody.
And also, like, that's it, cause like, you'll also get, if you do say it, you may get the reaction of, oh, you're taking it,
Yes.
why are you taking it, that was just a joke, right? And so learning how to navigate that, especially like for that's difficult for adults, but
Yeah.
if we teach, like you said, the students, and like you said, May, like, I may be uncomfortable because it's me that it's referring to, but if my friend has been taught that it's okay you can learn how to be an active ally, right? And that makes a difference.
But if, like, if teachers know how to do that, and then kids are observing that in class,
That's even better, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
maybe I should already know this, is there any kind of implicit bias training for the staff?
There hasn't
At all? Okay. I personally, feel like that's a thing that can be mandatory. It's mandatory for me at my job. I do it's an online training. It's not like hiring someone to come and teach us or anything, but, and we have to do it every year. And I think like repetitively doing that kind of training, helps you become more self-aware. And I definitely think that that's something that should be like mandatory and not some kind of like opt-in or come in on your day off to do it. I think that could be like, that should just be part of everyone's job training, I think.
Do people who are not employed directly by the school department, say like custodial staff, are they required to undergo? Because, I mean, there's definitely, I'm sure a certain amount of interaction. Now, like, are the food service folks, are they employed by NK or is that outsourced?
No, it's up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, I mean, and coaches, anybody who has contact with young people.
Yeah, it should be all
Yeah.
staff, it shouldn't just be, like, all of our other trainings are, like, and this is an issue that I have with RIDE, like, they mandate certain trainings, but they don't mandate any of this. And if they mandated it, it would make it so much easier, because then the schools would have no choice
Check the
but
box,
to check the box and do it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you have to do Title IX training every year, you have to do something else every year, like, but as far as RIDE is concerned, like, this is not even on their radar, and like, that would make it so much easier to implement if this came down from them as this is a priority. But we can't fix that, but we can fix what is happening in our district, right? And yeah, and I agree, like, you could take that online implicit bias test
I
at
just-
home, right? I mean, it doesn't even have to be,
I feel like that, like, even, like, I mean, it could even be something that's like 30 minutes online of implicit bias training, and that's like a really easy first step into it. Like, it's not gonna solve all the problems. Lots of people will take it and like not absorb anything, but it would be like I mean, it would have to be approved and everything, but it could be like a simple.
It's a
first
pretty
step.
actionable step.
Yeah.
It's a pretty actionable step, and there's some value to coming up with actionable steps.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it doesn't have to be super complex or anything, but it just like this kind of, just to get something out there.
And very common in other fields as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Is the training you get, is that something specific for your line of work, or is it something more broad?
The training I do it's training that's designed by the company I work for, but it's not necessarily like for the work I'm doing, it's just kind of general, like, we all have implicit biases, and then you click through this thing and you kind of learn about what that means and everything, and it's mostly just like training you how to interact with people who are different from you. So it can be like kind of vague, it's not specific to my job, but like I couldn't share that with you guys because it's like proprietary to my company.
Right. Okay.
So is this an area that we all feel is like important and that we should definitely So some of the suggestions that Erin had was to review the notes from last year's professional development training and prepare a synopsis with actionable recommendations to the school committee, which is informed by staff feedback. Another is to conduct an audit of the PD activities from last year that were attended by administrators, teachers, and students, and then create and distribute a survey to gather feedback and put that forward to the school committee. And then the other thing was to conduct a review of possible opportunities, either in person and virtual, for administrators, teachers, and staff, and then based on that, make a recommendation to the school committee. Like, now is the time that the school committee is gonna start working on budget things, and that was how we were able to get the one done in April. It took a year to get it, but like we said, the DEI committee recommended to the school committee that professional development was a priority, and we wanted to see one like budgeted for, and that's what happened. So, but there are other things, you know, that we could include after going through that, like, you know, review of possible professional development opportunities. So these are like the things that she had come through. She's really good at like making goals out of big goals. I don't know if anybody else has any other things that like tie into this. If there's something in the 3 things we just mentioned where you're like, yeah, I wanna start working on that, like.
Did we save those Post-its from that day? Like, we had, she asked us to write Post-its, right? There's like one thing you would want the administration to stop doing, start doing, and there was one more, maybe like hope they would do or something.
Yeah, something,
Mhm.
yeah,
Did we save those?
Yeah.
Oh, cool, we could look at those.
Yeah.
yeah,
I could like fish through those with
Mhm.
somebody
yeah.
and like,
I do that with you, I like that kind of stuff.
yeah, we could look and
You
see.
can get some good data out of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would do that with you.
How many teachers are in the district?
Okay, we have 3,700 students. It's something along the lines of, no, not that many. I'm not even sure. It's like maybe 500, 600, something like that.
So in this professional development, is it just faculty? Or does
The
it
one that
include-
happened in the spring?
Or, yeah, or like in general, when professional like when there's a professional development day,
Yep,
is it all faculty?
All staff.
All staff, all admin?
correct.
Okay.
I would like just push back a little bit on that, like only because I know like OFL wasn't mandated to attend that. So like, it's not necessarily all staff.
True.
Yeah, what's
Office
all
of Family Learning, sorry.
Mm.
And they're the ones whose office deals with like the majority of our underserved populations, and yet they weren't mandated to attend that. So like, it's, and I don't know who else other than OFL wasn't. So like, was all the food staff people there? Were the custodians there? Like, they weren't, right?
Not the custodians, not the
Yeah.
food staff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like when we say, I think that's an important point that Mary raised, like when we say staff, and
Mhm.
we're talking about these things, it should be any student facing position that we
Mhm.
have in the district, I
Yep.
think.
Okay.
I wonder if, just pulling off of your point, you know, we talked about, one of the action steps was maybe doing staff survey. I just wonder if the staff would appreciate hearing what happened with, or what data came out of what they did that day.
Right.
And as opposed to just asking them for more information, and they're like, well, what's gonna even happen with that? They might
Right.
really appreciate knowing this was a high priority among your colleagues. And I do think there is some value to that, that you were listened to, that data was compiled, and it was brought to this, even to this committee, to the
Yeah.
school committee, to whatever. Cause people like to know when they talk, they're listened to.
Yeah.
So I would be very open to doing that with anybody that, you know, you just can sort and do frequency counts and then see what you wanna do with the data after that.
Right, I
You
agree
know?
with that. I wrote some good things on those Post-its.
Well, I wrote
Don't
some
worry
passionate
about
things
it.
on those Post-its, I'd like to know if somebody read my passion.
I missed Post-it days.
You know, so,
Was there any, so, and I don't know, like, what did the administration do with that feedback? Has it just been sitting on a board in somebody's office?
No, I mean,
We
we've
mean that
we've
with no
looked at it.
disrespect,
Yeah,
it's like
I
a
think-
long,
yeah.
you know, listen,
Yeah,
like,
no.
it's hard.
But,
Yeah, no, we've looked at it. I mean, we've looked at, but we have more to do. We
Yeah.
definitely have more to do. I mean, it's something that we have to look at what we're looking ahead to in the spring, and we have to look at how we're gonna shape together something to follow up from last year. That's really what needs to happen.
was there follow-up from, Professor Murray Johnson after it with recommendations on next steps for us?
I've had conversations with her. I intend to have more.
Okay,
Because I think that that's gonna be my next step in the process, is I wanna continue our conversation.
I think I meant like specifically to that particular session, like, was there any follow-up that was sent out at the time to the staff about like, did this work, did this not work, like what was
Well, we always send out faculty feedback.
Okay.
Yep, so we did get feedback from that.
So the feedback could be reviewed along with
Correct.
the Post-it notes, right?
Yep, definitely. Yeah, we always have a faculty feedback, survey at the end of a PD day, so we can look at that too, you know.
So ideally, like, the school committee would get like recommendations from us by January, like at the start of the budget cycle, which would mean that we would have to have like our stuff together in like December, right? To like have it, you know, there. And so I'm wondering, what the best way is to break this down. You know, like maybe, you know, William and Victoria, like to review, opportunities for students, like is that something you two might be interested in, or is there something else, like just to kind of research what's out there, maybe what other districts do, like how they train or educate their students?
Yeah, I think that like talking to students would probably be a good idea.
I said last time about surveys,
Yes.
just getting it out there and getting students to like give their feedback. Like, it doesn't have to be constant, but like occasional surveys so that students can give like their thoughts, so that they, like, if students were getting surveys every once in a while, I feel like students would think like we're being heard and listened to, because like you keep on asking for more and more stuff. So I think surveys would be a good start for it.
So like something that would go out to the students saying, hey, what would you like to see?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I know they wanna keep it anonymous, but I know like at the college level, oftentimes if students participate in something, they'll say, oh, we'll enter you in a raffle for an Amazon gift card. Would that potentially, increase student participation?
I don't know, like.
I mean, you know, it would have to be like whoever wins, but, you know, you could kinda do it quiet, you wouldn't announce it.
From my
I'm just
experience,
thinking like
our students participate. When we
Yeah.
did our equity
Yeah.
vision
Yeah, we got a
feedback,
lot of
we
great
got a lot of
feedback from
students
that.
who,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
participate in that, and we've done other ones too, that students are, they're very eager to express their opinions, which are
Okay.
really, really helpful when they do,
Then when they
so.
get to college and they realize, you know, oh,
Yeah.
if I do this, I could
Got
have like a
Amazon gift
$25
cards.
Amazon
Yeah.
gift card.
So I know that there has been some, like, for stuff that goes out to students, right? Like, so if we in this committee, like with William and Victoria's feedback, like what should we ask the students, and we said that we wanted to survey the student body on this. I'm never quite sure, like, does that have to get approved by the school committee? Shivali, you know we've had this question before, right? Or is that something that the administration can send out without having to get?
For the surveys?
Yes,
We can send out surveys.
okay.
We now have like the opt-out option, so we would send it out and just clarify. Of course, we always run it by Rob and Kenny before the principals send anything out. But we can always, upon you guys' approval, we can send something out and just say, there is an opt-out option.
Okay,
As long as an opt-out option is given.
it's fine, okay. We still have to get school committee approval to do that, just cause we're just an advisory committee,
Mhm.
we can't like do anything actionable without their review, but that would be something that I think we could get to the school committee, you know, so that could then get out, so that we would have enough feedback by December, right? So like, this is, we have a meeting, the school committee has a meeting on the 24th, and then another one on the 19th of November, right? So if we had something at our next meeting to like look at and then kick up to the school committee to at least start the student feedback, and that way we would have it back by December, does that sound, do you think coming up with the questions for us to review at our November meeting is realistic, which hopefully is
Yeah,
before?
just like gathering information from students about what they would
Well,
want.
no, more like,
Like-
what would you want the survey to say, right? Like,
Yeah.
what questions would we
Yeah.
ask them, yeah.
So with the opt-out, Shivali, if you just don't participate, isn't that opting out? Oh, what is,
Yeah, but it's been a little controversial, so we just wanna make it very clear to students and families that there's an opt-out option,
so
because
what
sometimes.
opt-outs, so they won't get any information about it at all, you mean?
No, there will just be a record of it on Aspen, so we provide teachers, if we are distributing the survey, let's say we are administrating the survey during advisory, during school day,
Mhm.
we would let all the advisory teachers know, here's a list of students that have opted out.
So it basically it's up to the students and families when it comes to like a survey. I think that an example of a survey was the Prevention Coalition did a student health survey, right? And so they had the option to take it or not. We were very upfront with families to say, this is a survey that, the school committees has reviewed and approved. Your child may take it or may not take it, up to you. And we set aside time during the day to take it, but if kids didn't wanna take it, they didn't have to take it.
So they just sit there then?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's done that way. Same way as what the survey works. The survey works is a survey administered by the Department of Ed. It's given every year to every student in the state. And it asks them a number of questions, academic related, school environment related, all those things. Students can opt to take it or they can opt not to take it. It's really up to them, and if they take it, they take it. If they don't, then they don't. So yeah, it's just a matter of like, we wanna,
Be clear.
yeah, be upfront with that if it's a survey that we administer, then they can choose to take it or not.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So, you guys might already know this, cause you've been here longer than me, but when they're asking for your feedback on this, are we asking more for them to kind of come up with topic areas or specific questions? Like, have you ever experienced this, or would this be helpful to you? Like, what do we want? I feel like we've given you a kind of a big thing on you, but if you know where you're going with it, I'm good with that, but I don't know where you're going with it. Does that make sense? So do you know what you would have to do before November? Or are you
Please log
still
in through the
fuzzy?
Google Home app.
Well, apparently we're gonna go somewhere on the
Mhm.
Google Map. So be honest, because, we gotta be honest.
Yeah, cause I'm not the best at like in my head, I don't understand why everybody doesn't know what's in my head, so.
Well, I tell you, your daughter is an extremely good communicator, so.
She did not get that from me. I know.
So like, would we like them to come up with specific questions to ask the students?
Yes, I would like you to come up with like what you think, cause you said survey the students, right, around this area, so like what would we ask them, right? So that way you can come back and say, these are the things that we think that we should ask the student body. And then we can put that into survey, we can get the school committee to approve it, and then we can send it out.
Yeah, so it's specific questions, not just overall topics.
Whatever, whatever you
I would brainstorm and I
yeah.
would go big.
Yeah.
I would say any
Okay.
question you think students might be interested in giving feedback on around the topic of equity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and if you come back with 25 questions and we're like, yeah, no, we're gonna do 5 of those.
So whatever you guys think would be important for us to get information on to further the work. I'm starting to think I'm cute, but I'm not you guys, so, it's harder to come up with good questions than you think. Can we all kind of come up with a couple examples of good questions that we think might be helpful for them for a springboard? And then, cause they're smart, they're gonna run with it from there. But I'm struggling right now to come up with a
Well, are
good
we
question.
thinking of it like to send to the whole district, or are we just
Or high school, good question.
Or are we asking 6-year-olds, or like, are we doing different surveys, or?
I think we have, excellent question.
Not to make it
I
bad.
was thinking more high school at this
Yeah.
point, although I clearly think that all students, even 6-year-olds, have opinions and thoughts on this. It's
Yeah.
just a little bit harder to kind of tease that out. I was thinking if we started with high school, that would not be a bad place to start. But I don't know what the whole committee's thinking.
So do we wanna do something where if we're looking for like our input, that each of us come up with, say, a minimum of 2 questions, and then submit them to Victoria and William?
Yes, ma'am.
We
Okay.
could do that, yep.
Let's do that. But then you can say, this is a stupid question. Never say that. Never say
No
that.
such thing as a dumb question.
I know, but you would say this doesn't seem as relevant or relatable to high school students, and maybe you would kinda help us, because,
Can I also make a suggestion? We do have a Racial Equity Alliance group at the high school. You could probably like pop in there,
yeah.
there's an advisor here, and then you can kind of brainstorm questions there. And then we also have Student Union that has ability to communicate with the whole student body, so maybe if you took the questions, you both looked at it, then you went to these two committees and got feedback, then you'll get a little bit more student voice as well. Then come back here.
That's a good idea.
So we'll all send a couple questions to you, just kind of like what's in our brain, but you guys are totally allowed to say, "Meh." But then you would also go and come up with your own, and then talk to the other two groups that you mentioned. I think that's like, those are like actionable steps, right? You get to review our work, you get to go talk to two groups of your peers, and you get to kind of collate that information and add to it.
So what, can I ask, what is the goal of the survey?
Good question.
I think, my understanding, and William, jump in and tell me I'm wrong, is like to find out from a student standpoint, like what's important to them to have in like like, what would they want the teachers to
Okay.
be, like, right? Is that,
Yeah, and I was just like, certain issues that they've dealt with, and how they would want it to be fixed, or like what they would want to see in the future, in the school, of like actions instead of just like surveys asking questions. They give us like their idea of what they think we should do to fix it, like the issues that they were dealing with, so.
Oh, but do you feel on the spot? Cause I just X'd myself out, and I just X'd her out, and now I don't want you to feel on the spot. Let's add middle school, but not all that. Just kidding. I don't want you to feel on the spot, cause that's not what this is all about. Anyone, like, we're gonna like go in depth in what's wrong in the high school or something. I don't want us to feel that.
and that's an important point, like, this isn't about like what obviously is about like what's currently happening, but it's more about like how can we improve it, not trying to like gotcha to like somebody for doing something wrong, like but we can't fix things if we don't know what's happening, so I think that's an important point.
But even like surveying the students, if you get like a pattern of things that they've experienced, then you can see if there's a training that targets that.
I'm taking the liberty of making a Google Doc that I'm gonna share on the same email as you just sent.
Please, yes.
And make us all editors, and we could just add to that Google Doc instead of inundating you with emails, is that okay?
That's a teacher at work.
So while they focus on that, we can focus on looking at what we've done, right? And like, compiling feedback and, bringing back, Rob, I know you have to go, so bug out whenever you need to.
I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah, no,
mean
no,
to
sorry.
be doing that, but I
No,
do
no,
have to
no.
run out a little early tonight. I'll-
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah,
we'll-
okay.
Have a great night, everyone, thank you so much.
You too, Rob,
Okay.
thank you.
So, you know, it would be easier, I think, if people in the district did the review of the PD that we had, because the rest of us don't know it, but maybe the rest of us could work on, like, opportunities that might be out there to bring in, you know, Mary, I'm sure you have a bunch after all the training that you've been through, right, like ideas, not that I'm gonna ask you to tell me any now, but like,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I would need to go through some of the,
yeah.
what we did, but, yeah, that's a good idea.
So,
did we just agree, cause I cast a lot of clarifying questions. Are we gonna get the Post-its and get to go through them and make copies?
Yes.
I was gonna like ask you for your number after this and be like, do you wanna do this? Like,
No, we're gonna do this.
if anyone wants to join us, you
So-
can, but we're definitely doing this.
You guys, are either of you gonna be data people when you grow up? But I mean, you're almost grown up, but you know what I mean. Are you gonna be data people?
I don't think
no,
Victoria's
Victoria's like,
like,
okay,
okay,
don't worry.
yeah.
Because
She's
it's
gonna
fun
be an
if you
audio
like
reader.
it.
It's so fun. Big one, we all.
Alright, so we'll do that and we'll send we'll come up with a meeting time if anyone wants to join us. And then you can ask Rob for all the sticky notes.
Yes, I will ask Rob for the sticky notes. Yeah,
And I'll come to
We're
you
tight like
since
that.
you did the sticky notes.
okay.
You know, I'll come to DMS if you want.
Yeah, or you can come here or whatever, you know, I don't mind,
Whatever
I don't
you
mind
want.
driving. Okay.
So you two are gonna be our post-it note people,
Yeah,
yes?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we are gonna
Okay.
at least go through the post-it notes,
Okay,
yes.
alright. We're all going to send or add 2 questions to the Google Doc, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
But
then-
everybody else do theirs first, cause I'm not really sure what mine are gonna look like, so I'm gonna.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
They're gonna be like, that question was
Plus
awful,
one.
and we're definitely not putting
Or else
questions
that
in.
was great, and I was thinking that, I just didn't get it down quick enough.
And then once we do that, William and Tori, you all can kind of come up with feedback from other students and then come back to us with, you know, these are the things that we think are important to find out. Does that sound good?
Yeah, definitely.
William looks like he has no
And would this
idea.
be like, would this be like a kind of like regular thing, like once every 3 meetings we come up with new questions? Cause new things happen, like where we might wanna ask different questions. Now and again, throw out different surveys, would that be like?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think like, you know, like, so one of the other things on here was like, access to like advanced classes. Like, so at some point we can ask questions about that, right? Or like, hate speech and like prohibited behavior, like things like that, and just kind of keep throwing things out there. And I would also add just like, is there anything else that you
Yeah.
want the DEI committee to know, right? Because that way we're asking them about like, here we're talking about professional development, but somebody's like, yeah, but you know what else is happening and you didn't ask me about that? Like, so that could be a question too, like what else do you think is important that the DEI, right? Does that give people opportunity to like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, cause every time I hand in a survey, I'm like, oh, and I should have put this and this and
Yeah.
this and this.
Yeah, or, oh, I'm not sure that's really relevant to what
Yeah.
they're asking about, but, things like that. And the first one we'll probably wing it, right? But then after that,
Yeah.
we'll get the hang of like,
More of like a systematic type, yeah.
yeah.
And it would be very cool if like the next surveys were more or less in response to the first one.
Mm.
Yeah, to the feedback from the.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like to directly say that. I love the idea that we're reading the Post-its. Oh my god. I feel like this is revolutionary. Like we're gonna read these Post-its and we're gonna like use the Post-its. I'm so excited.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm so excited.
I just wanna clarify for myself, we're gonna ideally finalize the survey questions at the next
Yeah.
DEI
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
Yes.
And then after that, it goes out to the students.
Well, after that, it goes to the
It goes
school
to the school committee and then
right?
it goes, okay.
So that's what I'm looking at, our calendar.
No, it's a lot of,
In my
yeah.
brain.
And so our next meeting is the 20th, and unfortunately, the school committee meets on the 19th. So we would miss that one. There may be a way around that. I gotta
Is
see.
it monthly or is it every 2 weeks?
Here is monthly.
school
School committee is typically every 2 weeks, but November only has one meeting because I think of Thanksgiving. So. Okay, we'll plan on having it for the November 19th meeting. And then we can go from there about when it gets to the school committee.
Reasonable timeline since you're doing the work.
Mhm.
So I think we all can work on, except for Shivali, maybe a review of professional development opportunities. And maybe Shivali, I'll assign it to you because you're here and Rob's not, but, what we've
No, it's supposed to
actually.
be the other way.
You need to put him in charge of things now that he's not here.
He always assigns things to me, now I get to.
There you go. Of the audit of what we actually like did for professional development, and I think, not just, equity focused too, but maybe other professional development, cause if, that could be an answer too, like if we're doing all this professional development, but we're not focusing any of it on equity,
Yeah.
right? Like, so if there's 5 days and 4.5 of it are spent on other things, like maybe reviewing all professional development.
Yeah, I was looking up some online modules that we were talking about. I found, like, I looked up few, I don't know if there's any fee or anything attached to it, but there are these several platforms
Mhm.
out there that, and actually everything that you were saying, the vocabulary you were saying, I was seeing those on the titles of those modules. So I sent a few over to Rob,
Okay.
just for him to take a look at.
And I know NERI has a great social justice program, and they do professional development, like they have, it's an online platform, I looked at it, they've got
Yeah.
a ton.
They do.
So,
They really
and I'm
do.
sure that they would be happy to, I'm gonna speak for them,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
partner with us on this, right?
So what does NERI?
National Education Association of Rhode Island.
It's the teachers union.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's the union, yeah.
Yeah, and we can reach out to Amanda Scott too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She always helps us with some of the trainings we're looking for teachers, so
Yeah,
we can do that.
and
So
they,
Rob and I can work on that piece.
okay,
Bring something back for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. Does everybody feel like they have a piece of this and everybody knows what they're doing? Okay.
More or less.
Okay, so that's the one I think that sounds like we identified as like the most critical or one of the biggest ones to kind of get a handle on. Was there anything else that we wanted to discuss today in terms of assigning activities, or do we want to say we're going to work on this and then we'll regroup on something else? What do people think? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
The one recommendation that I was going to make is that, we've been going back and forth with, like diversity of the staff, and that's not actually part of the recommendations from the audit because it wasn't in the audit, which was kind of a neat little end around. But, so, we don't have any specific goals or recommendations that came out of the audit because of that, so, is that something that, I don't want to answer state, but like, is that something that we, think that we wanna continue to try to tackle here? Is that something that we think we need to kick back to the full school committee to have them like go back the other way? So just, there are some recommendations in this file, and I know people didn't have a chance to look at the goals, but that would be my other thing, is just kind of look at what's in here, and when we come back on the PD question in November, like, what is the next one that we wanna kind of have, like, that we're working on?
I don't know if it should be the next one, but I do think it should be a focus.
Oh, it absolutely
Yeah,
should be, yeah.
That was the one thing that I took away from, well, I don't wanna say the one thing, one of the things that I took away from training in April was she looked at the audience and she said, whoa, we have work to do here. I mean,
Yeah.
so I'd like, not to be mean to us, but I even look at them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right, 'cause
And I'm interested in this goal is like greater penalties for hateful speech and behavior. I'm interested in the language of that, and I know that there's also
good point.
another committee about discipline
Mm-hmm.
that's like kind of like simultaneously happening with us. I'm wondering if we have a little crossover episode where we like talk to each other about these things, right? I'm interested in the wording of that. I'm interested in that.
Yeah. So just to touch on that, like, so this says penalties, which I think is harsh because that's not kind of where we're going. In the policy advisory committee, we have been working on a hate motivated behavior policy, which focuses less on punitive, more on education. Like, so when we have an incident where a student is using a racial slur or a homophobic slur, like, not just, oh, we shouldn't say that, right? Like,
Right, and now you have detention.
And now you have detention,
Right.
yeah. It's like, how can we use that as an educational opportunity, and also, create a culture where, like, that's not acceptable, right? And like, this is why, so that is something that we've been working on, and like, so penalty is maybe not it's not like we're gonna, there needs to be consequences, but
Sure, right,
there needs to be an educational component to it, and I have a feeling that's one that we'll probably hear a lot.
And also tied into like, it really ties into the professional development about what restorative practices look like and what a culturally responsive classroom looks like. And that absolutely ties into this as well. I know you and I have talked about that as well, so.
And I love the idea of a crossover with the discipline committee, even if it's not the whole committee, just like a couple people from each, because they formed because of this committee, right? Like, that was something that we said was important, and like, so, right, how can we work together to, on that, because, discipline, we know there's an issue with disproportionality, but it also ties into everything else too. Does anybody else have any comments, questions? So you're new, like, what do you think, like?
Now I'm on this one. No, I felt a little uncomfortable being on this committee, I'll be honest with you, because I don't think I have a lived experience. But I am very passionate about my students. And I do have, my students, many of them have very different life experiences. So I will do my best to learn. That's all.
No, thank you for we thought it was important that there be a voice from Knesset, and we appreciate you being here to, you know, represent, because, like, let's face it, that is the school that has, like, the lowest academic performance, it has the most disproportionality, like, but I also know from having been in there myself and having somebody who works in there, what a fabulous school it is, and how amazing those kids and those teachers are in there. And
I agree 100% with you. An amazing school, and we just need to.
Yeah, so thank you. Okay, does anybody have anything else that they wanna talk about that relates to the goals that they think is important?
Can I just ask them a quick question? Seniors, both of you?
Juniors.
Wow.
I know we did
Yeah.
them for like 2 whole other
I'm
years.
so impressed.
I know.
Okay.
So, I don't know if this ties in with the goals, but I do wanna make sure an issue that we talked about, I think it was in the spring, about accessibility really stays on the front burner.
Yes.
And that's something that I feel like, and I'm gonna just share it with you guys here, cause every time I come into this room, I look around at all the photos of the kids here, and now, there may be somebody with a hidden disability, but to me, it's this message that I used to get for years and years, about CLAC, well, as part of CLAC, and why is it when we have photos on the website that everybody looks pretty similar, pretty neurotypical, pretty healthy? And I was told that it had to do with confidentiality. And I said, well, look, I signed a photo release. If you wanna use my child's image, go right ahead. And now, I haven't looked at the website for the individual schools. I do know at one point, some of the individual schools did have photos of like the kiddos who were in, Next Step in life skills. But if you look around here, that's one thing that is not reflected. Now, it could be somebody might have, you know, like growing up, my brother had dyslexia, but you wouldn't have known by looking at him. So it's possible. So that was the message was, well, somebody might have a disability, but that's not reflected in that. So I would love to see just up here if we could, you know, have that just,
I think that's
it's just
great.
one step, you know.
Representation.
Another very
Representative.
actionable step,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how
Like, little
difficult it is.
actionable steps add up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it does seem like such a big thing. It does seem like such a big thing, but the more little actionable steps we do, and that is an incredibly actionable step.
So how do we do that? Because like, when you are parenting a child who is significantly disabled, it's exhausting, and, you know, what else do you do? Like, how do you get those steps taken if you've made the suggestion and it's like, oh, that's a good idea? But so how do we make that like an actionable?
So what I
thing?
would say for that is, what we as a committee can do is make a recommendation to the school committee that says, like, for, you know, in any area where we are doing like student or staff like representations, like, to make every effort to ensure that it is representative of our entire student population, right? And that includes neurotypical, disabled students, like you know what I mean, and just specifically say it, because I think a lot of times, and you're so good at it, Mary, like, because you've lived it, right? So you see what other people don't, and I think it's not that people don't want to, although I know you and I have had conversations where it's, you know, but I think just saying, like, it is important to us, like we talked about the other night, like, what does our district value, right? And so that shows what our district values, right? And listening to those things shows that. So I think just making the recommendation out of this committee, however we wanna phrase it, to the school committee that this is important, and then having the school committee have that conversation with the administration about how to implement it. Because you're right, like, unfortunately, like, and I don't think anybody is sitting up there going, nope, we're not gonna put that kid in, but I think it's not like something that is front of mind, you know, when.
Well, I wonder if somebody could then, and I don't know, because I don't know the scope of everything, but then you could actually do some kind of review, like somebody could go in and say, like somebody could walk through here and say, you could have a little checklist. I mean, I don't wanna like minimize it, but I also wanna make it actionable, so somebody could do like a little audit. Is there representative photos on the walls. I mean, that I think would be possible. And then and then I think, like, just speaking for Carolyn, if somebody came in and said, well, you don't, and she'd be like, oh my goodness, and let's, like then,
Yeah.
like, so sometimes people need feedback to then take the next step, and I don't know if that's the bailiwick of this committee versus administration, but you would think that somehow we might wanna follow up on whatever the school committee, I don't know, enacts,
Yes.
so. Cause that's how you get stuff done, is somebody looks to see if it's done,
Right, and the report's back.
and reports
Says it is
back.
not done. I go,
Yeah,
okay.
no, I mean, it's just like I just made a call for myself on fidelity checks that I gotta start doing them because that's how things get done.
Yeah.
So we just need to think about that once we do that, and then we can yes, there should be part one and there should be a part two.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like that, like if we walked into any school or any website, like, do you think, like, it would help to say, like, there's 15 pictures in here, right, and, like, 90% of those are, cause you called out the Perkins Eastman presentation, and you were 100% right, that was all white kids, they were all neurotypical, as far as we could tell, and none of them had a physical disability, right, and so that's not what we should be putting out there, right, and so, like,
And that's, that's something that was created for the district from somebody
correct,
outside.
yes.
And this was, I don't know if everybody's aware, what
I'm not, yeah.
Perkins Eastman is the company, the architectural firm
Mhm.
that's creating the plans to make the renovations and, to the schools and to the new Wickford Middle School.
Yep.
A year ago, I stood up and I spoke to them, and this was just like 2 months after my son died. And I said, I feel really passionately about this, having been a parent of a disabled child, that there needs to be some visibility. Like, they showed this diagram, but this was for the proposed combined middle school that the bond issue did not pass last year. But they showed a picture of the auditorium, and instead of showing the ramp, the access ramp, just putting somebody with a wheelchair, they had somebody who was able to walk, and like there were missed opportunities. So I had said I would encourage Perkins Eastman to really consider these graphics and to revise them. So I was kind of surprised when I saw the ones for Wickford Middle School that actually almost went in the opposite direction. But I do think, though, it's also incumbent upon the administration to be able to notice that. Like, I think that's a pretty easy one,
Mhm.
when you look at all the kids. I mean, I don't know, I didn't have any children at Wickford Middle School, but I can't imagine every one of the children there is white and neurotypical.
Fair enough, yeah.
And it makes you wonder if that organization is considering disabled kids. And at DMS, it's, I'm just thinking about the building. If you wanna go to like one floor, you have to take one elevator, and if you wanna go to another floor, you have to take like another elevator.
Yeah,
It's all like,
yeah.
and it's all like, it's kinda crazy, and you wonder like, who was thinking about this? Like, no one
Nobody.
was the answer, like nobody was, like nobody was thinking about the people who actually have to use the thing.
So that's why
Yeah.
I've raised my voice, like to say, this made for an inequitable experience for my child, because it took so long to go up and down the elevator, and it impacted his ability to access his services.
Mhm.
But when you have one parent.
But you're a parent on this committee.
Yeah.
So that's different now, right? I mean, right, so to me, that is, like, so I said, the reason I'm here is I'm passionate about advocating for my students. You're passionate about that, so then we have to kind of promote your ability to use that passion, because that's at the forefront of your mind. And I'm not saying, this is not to like be mean to anyone else, but it's not on the forefront of everybody's mind, it's not. It's just not, because people live busy lives and they have important things for their busy lives. But since you're passionate and we have you, then we need to use you, right? And that this committee should be a vehicle by which we can do that. So it may be that this committee, again, not knowing the scope of the committee and being new, and I swore I would not talk at all, and you can see yourself. I'm like, I'm gonna sit back here and I'm gonna listen, and you can see why that went out the window.
I did that in my first meeting too.
You know, but like I always swear I'm not gonna talk, and then I always do. But anyway, like so maybe this is what we say, is we would like the representation on like any public awareness materials, we want somebody from this committee to be on the public awareness materials review committee or something like that. I mean, yeah, 'cause right? Yes. So we just have to like figure out how to mobilize our passion in a systematic way, and this committee should be able to do that.
Write that down somewhere.
Oh, I
Write
love that,
down.
yes.
Put it in the vision
Yes.
statement.
Yes.
Version
That is,
19.
yes.
So
Open it back up.
so I did speak, I spoke twice.
And now,
And
yes, but before they went out again, I wish that had come back here. You could say, you still didn't do it, go back, do it again.
So I recently emailed
Yeah,
our superintendent, the town manager,
yeah,
school
good
committee,
for you.
may have been other people. I included the remarks from last year and said, it's at this point on the tape that they said, Mrs. Lopresti, we would welcome your input, we'll reach out to you. That was a year ago. And I've been told that they're making changes and it's compliant with ADA. And basically it felt dismissive, like, trust us, we're doing
We're
this.
doing the bare minimum, don't worry.
Yeah.
It's ADA compliant, yeah.
ADA compliant
Which
is
was
not
completely
necessarily,
the antithesis. What I had said is not just making it ADA. So yes, the elevator at DMS may have been ADA
Right.
compliant, but it's not ADA or user friendly.
Yeah.
no,
You know, it's like saying,
no,
well, yeah, we have a handicap entrance, but you have to go all the way to the back of the
it's
building.
compliant, but it's not accessible.
Accessible.
We're
So
really
I would be
talking-
happy, like, if there was an actionable step, to pair up with somebody else and do like like a walkthrough for each of the buildings, including parking outside, because this impacts not just students, but if faculty and staff. I mean, all it takes is a faculty member who maybe has like a health episode and either becomes permanently disabled or might have a temporary disability. There was a story, I forget what forum it was in, about like a family member who came to the school for like a night as a guest and had to walk so far to get to where they needed to go that they had to keep stopping because the parking was in one place and the meeting spot was somewhere else. So, you know, to do like a walkthrough, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the buildings, but
So
I'm,
not all of them?
I'm super interested in accessibility, and I
Oh.
would be I would love
Okay.
to
Love that.
all right.
get together with.
So can we just pair up like outside and do that informally?
Yes,
to get things going?
absolutely, yeah. And then
Okay.
if you wanna come back with a recommendation on like having like a full accessibility review or like recommendations we made based on that, we can totally make that recommendation to the school committee. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thank
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm sorry for the loss of your son.
Thank you. But I said when he died, I said, I am gonna carry on his legacy, and because I just know that there were a lot of families, and I just, not just in North Kingstown, but in the state who have children who are very medically fragile and don't have the benefits of having like a two-parent family, or living in a middle-class community. And there's we had to actually play this game that I did during my internship last year. I forget the name of it, and it was, you had like a little profile, like who you were, and it was the folks that were like most disadvantaged, who starting out, it was kind of like the game of life, you keep like moving forward, and you would see like these people who, like they jumped a few like steps forward, like yay, they made some progress. And then it would be, your apartment building was sold, the landlord raised the rent, or things like that. And it was always those folks that were like, they continued to be disadvantaged, so.
No, that's great,
Yeah.
and I think like you had raised forever ago, like accessibility on the website, right? And just simple
Yes.
steps that could be
I did.
taken to like, make it more, nothing happened with that, right?
I know.
Even
Well,
like there's a government website for like colorblind.
Yeah, I remember
It
you
takes
mentioned that, yep.
4 seconds, and you're like, these are the 2 color codes.
Yep.
Is this readable?
Yeah.
No. Pick different
Yeah.
colors. Okay. It's the easiest thing
So
to
like
do.
you wouldn't, for example, like you wouldn't necessarily wanna have like a mauve background with white
Well, like,
print or something
you
like
wouldn't
that.
want like highlighter yellow and then highlighter pink on top,
Yeah.
because if you can't tell the difference between red and yellow, that's just highlighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like my dad's colorblind, so he told me all about it. But so like in theory, in general, you want a really light color like white and a really dark color like black, but then some companies are like, well, that doesn't match our vibe, or like there's colors, or like, so you have to make, it's literally like you enter your website into their website and they're like, you get a 56% or whatever you get. It's
Oh, that's-
so
yeah.
easy,
On-
yeah.
When the town of North Kingstown revamped their website, they did install this little widget, which you can click and you can change the font size and the color and all that kind of stuff. I've seen other widgets like this. I don't particularly like this one, but like that's an easy thing to add to a website where someone can go on it and then like customize it for how, for their particular needs.
Yeah, so
Um,
like stuff like that, yeah.
That's what my email was about a long time ago. The school website doesn't have anything like that. And I do some accessibility in like deliverables work at my job, and I can look at this website and think, this is not really the most readable website.
And for like the walkthrough and stuff, I'm sure you guys know this, but like, there's a lot of places that have like handicap spots, and all that means is it's near a ramp 2 miles to the left, where there's so many handicaps that don't need a ramp and just need to be closer, and like, there's more than just one disability, obviously. So,
Do you wanna be part of the accessibility review?
I'll be part of anything.
You should tell somebody we're doing this accessibility review, because I feel like, you know, we do need to sell like somebody work and have people going around looking just.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely,
If you
yeah.
carry a clipboard, no one will ask you what you're doing
And
there.
I'll be like, who's that lady outside?
So maybe like for the next meeting, or is that too soon to kind of come up with some actionable steps? Like if we could maybe meet in between?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, we won't be doing any visits.
No,
right away,
and to get her,
In the dead of night.
Yeah.
Like, go passion, oh no.
Passion.
Okay, awesome. Does anybody else have anything?
I would just like to add something a little bit about access to advanced courses. I don't exactly know what the solution would be yet. I still need to like think about it. But we were talking about dual enrollment last time. I think it was Miss Lawler who said like, what, you had a friend that had to buy certain supplies for a student that couldn't get them by themselves. I went to a high school freshman year that was on the same campus as University of New Orleans. It was UNO, and we shared a campus. And there were students who, my school did dual enrollment, and there were students who couldn't get supplies. So they just go into the class and just not have the right supplies and fail it, or just not do it at all, even though it was like right there for them. And it was like, so like, the school had like a great system where you could get in, but they didn't give you any supplies. So you're just like stuck, even though it's like so close. So I think that's like an important thing to focus on. Maybe giving students supplies for dual enrollment and certain stuff like that. I think that's a pretty big like, commitment, but.
Ask big and then get told no,
Yeah,
but don't
but-
not ask, right?
yeah,
I
but,
mean, that's.
Yeah, that's really important, because I had friends who like almost failed out of school because they couldn't get the certain supplies that they needed for like a subject they were really good at, but they just didn't have the supplies. So yeah, I think that's very important to focus on.
And that should be another one, and also, you guys are really good about actionables. Because you should be able to get materials lists from the classes that are offered dual enrollment and see what, like I was cranky about those stupid those calculators that cost like $300. I'm like, geez Louise, we should have a library, because now I have 5 of those calculators because my son's lost them every year. But every year I was cranky about that $300 calculator. And that is I believe $300 calculator is a significant expense that not all families
I
could
will say
easily.
we fixed that. The high school has fixed that. There was a calculator grant and there is now a calculator library.
Oh, see?
I love that.
See? So we just have to do that for other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
To your point, Will, I think like if we are, if we're serious about like offering, and if we mean it from our heart, it's not just like, hey, you can take these classes. I think ask big. I think it would require like an actual job, like a position that's like a liaison, right? That's like basically like the mom that's like, hi, you're taking this class and you need these supplies, and like you're taking this class and like you need these supplies, and like, and this is where you go. Here is the bus. Did you get there? Like, where's your Uber?
Are you
You know,
hungry?
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, because that, you know, the community that I was talking about was a very small community, and I mean, like a low number of students is what I mean by that. So it was like one teacher whose job it was one full day a week to be the mom and be like, do you have your supplies? Do you have? And because if we're truly serious about offering classes in a way that sets students up for success, we need a human to manage that.
100%. And I have to say only because my son had an IEP, right? And he had a mom.
Right.
And it's because of her that he
Right.
graduated, right? You know, so like, is there a way that we, and I don't mean me as the mom, I mean the person from the high school,
Yeah.
right? I mean, who really did, like, have you done this? Like, do you know? And like, helped him through his like post-high school plans. Like, and it was only because he had an IEP that he got that.
Right.
And
They
every
got the
student
services.
should have that, yeah.
Yeah, cause a lot of it is like, you were saying financial, and like, if you're like, these are the supplies you need, and you're like, I know I can't get this, I'm not gonna ask for it, I'm not gonna embarrass myself, whatever, so having
Yeah,
somebody
that's-
like
yeah.
walk you through it,
Yeah,
be like, why don't you have it, you have to answer them eventually,
right.
and like, just help
Yeah.
along. I
No,
agree.
that's great, William, and especially like you said, where you were, like, that literally the opportunity was physically right there.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
And to not be able to do it, so I think that's great, yeah. And my thing is ask big, right, like, we can
Yeah.
only get told no, but if we don't ask, we don't get it, right? So, I don't think any
Let someone else say
suggestion
no.
that, that benefits students and improves opportunity and access is a bad thing to ask for.
Thanks for bringing that up again.
Yeah, thank you. All right, anybody have anything else? Everybody know what they're supposed to do before the next meeting?
Going on a date.
Okay.
Is
Yeah.
everybody's just for email, is everybody's email on the
Everybody's
distribution
email is
list?
on that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't be shy about reaching out in between meetings, like, this is not the only time that we can talk to each other, right? So it's,
That's important. I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Second. I love that one.
What was your first name again?
Kalia.